Additional updates since original 1990 publication. Investigations after 1989 for the Sasquatch in Alberta. Since the decision to republish this work of 30 years ago, the publishers thought it might be a good idea to update the work a little bit. After all, 1989 and 1990 was a long time ago, and also, my investigation into this ongoing mystery have continued. In September of 2002, I moved away from the Wild Rose province to the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. The result, of course, was losing track of ongoing reports from the east side of the Rocky Mountains. But others have taken up the call, and on occasion, I do hear about Alberta Sasquatch incidents. I also did spend another 12 years doing research in Alberta after this book was originally published and authored 2 other titles in which some Alberta incidents were included. What follows now is an overview of possible Sasquatch encounters that I did investigate after the original publication of this work. I hope the reader will find them interesting and keep in mind that the existence of this creature is a possibility in Canada's Wild Rose province. August 4th, 1996. Mr. B. Adlington reported to me that while he was camping in a forest clearing on 904 Trunk Road, just south of the Livingston Fall Recreation Area on August 4th, 1996, he had an encounter with what could possibly be a young or juvenile Sasquatch. He had pulled his camper truck into the area the night before in preparation for an upcoming dirt bike event, which over the next number of days would bring many more people to this area setting up camps, and just generally turning the whole area into a small temporary community of off-road enthusiasts. But for now, he had the whole place to himself. At approximately 9:30 in the morning, as he was walking his dog and is enjoying an early morning crispness, a cup of coffee in hand. Some other campers had just arrived a few hours before. He was about to head back to his own camp when he heard a wailing cry, which kind of reminded him of the sound of a bear cub makes when in distress. His own words were as follows to one of my questions when I interviewed him. We were camped below this meadow, so I climbed this steep bank. When I got to the top of the bank, I was level with the meadow. I took a few steps forward, and I heard the noise it was making. I stopped in my tracks, and the dog stopped, and we both focused forward. I looked up and could see him against the trees on the far side of the meadow, and he was traveling from where I was standing, right to left, north to south. And while he was running, I watched and listened. I was hoping he could stay out of the meadow so I could have a longer, or he could stay out in the meadow so I could have a longer look or even come close, but after about 15 seconds, he disappeared into the trees. I watched for a while, but never saw any other signs. The witness went on to describe that at a distance of about 900 to 1,000 yards, the figure appeared to be covered in black hair, head to foot. It moved on 2 legs the entire brief time that he was in view. He thought it was between 5 to 6 feet tall. It was not slim, and estimated between 200 to 300 pounds. Too far distant to see any facial details, and no idea as to the gender. He saw this thing for about 15 seconds as it moved into the trees out of sight. The sound the thing made, he describes as similar to the noise a bear cub makes when distressed. Yet the witness is certain that this was not a bear he was looking at. The dog was watching the subject with interest but did not bark or try to pursue. The witness remained in the area as other people arrived and the off-road event went off without further incident. As far as I was able to confirm, no other event attendee reported seeing anything odd during this time. I did interview the witness and went to the location and found nothing in the area to confirm that a Sasquatch could have been there. On the other hand, there was nothing to prevent a Sasquatch from being there either, as this part of the Alberta Rockies is known for its wildlife. So, what was it Mr. Adlington saw that morning? Could it have been a bear or a person in dark clothing? He does not think so. At the time, I found no reason to doubt his conclusion. August 17th, 1993. This incident was forwarded to me by 2 colleagues and good friends at the time, the late John Green and the late Ray Crow. Both men exchanged info with me and each other when we were made aware of events in our area. In this case, 2 witnesses whom had had a strange encounter on a public hiking trail in Jasper National Park, Alberta. It was approximately 6 a.m. on August 17th, 1993. One of the 2 witnesses wrote out a statement. We were on the hiking trail, which at this point went along the back of the stream. Well, at first we hear this strange hooting type noise. It came from about 30 meters off the trail. We wondered what it was, so we went to investigate. Being cautious as possible, we crept closer and saw this large, hairy man. It stood about 9 feet tall and was built bigger than a gorilla. It seemed to be looking at something or someone. It turned and looked at us, and I saw in its eyes a gleam of intelligence and wild fury. We ran as fast as we could away from the beast as it followed. We ran for about 20 minutes. It seems that it could have caught us at any moment, but it seemed that all it wanted to do was chase us away from what we do not know. When we went back to the location 8 hours later, we saw many large tracks, bigger than the largest shoe. We also noticed that there was more than one set of tracks. Unfortunately, it started to rain hard shortly after that and the tracks were lost. It appears that the witness never saw a second creature, nor did they give any contact information to either Ray Crow or John Green. Researcher Scott McNabb of the BFRO also looked into this case and managed to talk to one of the witnesses. I, too, was able to talk to one of the men over the phone, and he told me that some of these tracks were 3 inches down in semi-dry mud. That must have been one large downpour of rain to wipe out tracks embedded 3 inches in partly dry mud. Neither witness wanted to be made public, so I will just refer to his first name, William. Now William came away with the impression that there had to have been 2 creatures in the area, as they found 2 sets of footprints. They only saw the one with dark hair from head to toe, approximately 9 feet tall and built bigger than a gorilla. Well, I came away thinking they either encountered a Sasquatch or they like to make up stories, though wanting to keep confidential seems to argue against attention seeking. December 12th, 1998. A friend and colleague, the late Rene Dehedin, forwarded to me a letter he got from Mr. Redmond, who had a friend whom told him he saw a Sasquatch on the road near the town of Grand Prairie, Alberta during the late fall of 1998. Rene thought I might want to follow up on this. He was right. I contacted Mr. Redmond and found out the name of one of the witnesses, one Jack Durant. He lived in Grand Prairie and was surprised to hear from me and wondered how I had found out about it. After some time, he told off the encounter. Mr. Durant was driving a company truck south on Route 40 about 20 miles south of Grand Prairie at approximately 9:30 a.m. on December 12, 1998. A co-worker was in the truck with him. This man was new to the job and had recently moved to the area from Vancouver, BC. His first name was Stuart. The two who had just passed the Windy Andy Road turnoff and were driving into the Smoky Valley, which contains the Smoky River. Jack saw, to his astonishment, on the high tree line of the right-hand side, west side of the road, a dark brown, hair-covered creature which seemed to be deciding whether or not to proceed with this truck coming towards it. At this point on Route 40, there is a hill between the road and the tree line. Jack told me that the creature, after a moment of hesitation, it seemed to stop itself by grabbing a tree with its left hand and then let go of the tree, all in a fast yet graceful manner. Quickly advancing down the hill, jumped a ditch running along the roadside, and crossed the road in front of the moving truck, which at this point was perhaps 150 to 200 feet from it. It was moving at a very fast pace when it disappeared in the tree line on the road's east side. The entire sighting was about 30 seconds in duration. Jack described this creature as ape-like. It stood about 7 feet tall and walked upright like a man the whole time it was in sight. It was covered in either very dark brown or black hair, and had dark gray skin on the face, which was also hairy in places. The creature never turned to face them when it crossed the road, but seemed intent on crossing the road as quickly as possible. Jack said that when he first sighted the creature, it was facing towards the truck and seemed to hesitate for a moment by stopping itself by grabbing a tree. Jack did not stop the truck, but continued to drive on, both men talking loudly to each other about what had just happened. There was about a foot of snow, and the two men did see a path it made, but did not return to have a good look at it. It was a sunny day, but cold and a little windy. On the return trip after dark, the trail left by the creature was still there, but had been nearly filled in by blowing snow. Jack also told what most impressed him about the creature was the speed and grace it displayed when it moved. It never broke into a run, but walked very fast as came down the hill and crossed the road. in the foot of snow, leaving the ditch on the road's right side. The second witness in this incident declined my request for an interview. July 1995. A report by 2 hikers came to my attention by fellow researcher Don Harrick, a member of the BFRO, Bigfoot Research Organization. This incident occurred on a popular hiking trail near the town of Jasper, Alberta, in Jasper National Park. The witnesses were hiking up the trail towards the summit and had stopped to take a break and to shoot a number of photographs of the hot spring and local mountain scenery. A friend and I were hiking on the Sulphur Ridge Trail. We came to a place where the trail had fallen away, so we decided to stop for a break. I took out my camera to take a picture of the hot springs below. I happened to look up at the summit and I noticed someone standing up there. I started waving because I thought it was a person, and since it seemed we were the only people on the trail, we'd be walking past them anyways. I even pointed my camera at it, but didn't take a picture due to the distance. The thing didn't wave back, and it was then I really looked up at it. It was about 6 p.m., so there were plenty of light still. What I saw looked to be a dark brown man covered with hair. It stood upright and had arms and legs like a human. After several minutes, it started to run down the face of the mountain. We were below the tree line, but well within sight of the summit. At that point, I said, "Holy shit, that guy is nuts." I now thought it was a mountain biker because he descended so quickly. About 1.5 minutes at the most, it came straight down without using the switchbacks, and that's when I knew this thing was not human. I thought of a grizzly or other animal. When it hit the tree line, I realized it couldn't possibly be a bear because it stood taller than a young tree. My friend and I had not heard of any sightings, so we didn't have any preconceived idea of what we were looking at. We continued hiking to the summit, mainly out of stupidity. We didn't talk about what we saw or what it could have been. When we hit the top of the tree line, I realized there was no way a person could have ran down the front of the mountain the way we witnessed that thing do. The face of the mountain was covered with loose rocks and gravel, making it hard to descend at a fast pace, let alone run. When we returned home, we talked to our roommate about the sighting, and a friend said we must have seen a Sasquatch. We returned the next day but didn't see anything. We did, however, take note of the surroundings. The trees at the tree line were well over 7 feet tall, and the creature towered over them. The area in which it ran to is a place where no human can get to. There are no trails, and it is too steep to try and climb down. The forest there is thick and green, and anyone who would stray off the trail could easily become lost. The main witness in the case did at one point have his camera on the subject, but did not snap a picture as at the time he thought he was looking at a man. He did search all of the other photos he had taken at the rest stop in case he might have caught the subject unintentionally. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Both witnesses wished to remain confidential. October 5th, 1985. This incident may have happened in 1985, but I was not made aware of it until the witness contacted me May of 1993. He wished at the time to remain confidential, so I will just refer to him as Mr. A.B. A.B., who resided in Calgary, Alberta at the time of the investigation, told me of a strange animal he had encountered while traveling north on the 940 Trunk Road, approaching the Livingston Recreation Area, just about 6 p.m., October 1985. He could not recall the exact date. There were 2 other people in the car with him, his son, a boy of 12 years, and a friend whose first name was Leo. The sun was getting low after the warm, sunny day and the clear blue skies. As they approached the recreation area, they notice ahead of them, perhaps 2 city blocks distance, a strange animal walking away from the east side of the road, car passenger side. They only saw the creature for about 15 seconds, and as it walked into the lodge pole pine trees, it was not seen again. The 2 men thought at first that it might be a grizzly bear, as they pointed it out to AB's son. They thought it strange the bear was walking the whole time when it was in sight, upright on 2 legs. A.B. described the creature as covered in cinnamon-colored hair, a yellowish brown, and that it appeared to be well over 6 feet tall. He described a flat face. However, he also stressed that they really did not get close enough to notice much of a facial detail. He thought it was a very heavy creature, but wouldn't hazard a guess as to how heavy it might have been. He did state it was goddamn big. He did stop the car when the spot was reached. They then cautiously searched along the tree line for about 10 minutes for sign, as a bear was no longer their prime suspect. No footprints were found, and the creature was not seen again. At the time of my interview with AB, he was a commissioner for the Calgary Regional Health Authority. Before that, he was a big rig driver from the early 1960s until retirement in the mid-1980s. His fellow commissioners described him as a friendly fellow who was not known to be a prankster or storyteller. In fact, at the time of his report to me, he still was not prepared to state that it was definitely a Sasquatch they saw that day. He can't figure out what it was. Another interesting note in this report: this incident happened almost on the same spot Mr. Adlington claimed to have had a sighting 11 years later on August 4th, 1996, the first incident in this updated chapter. May 1990. This Alberta report was sent to BFRO researcher Dawn Harrick, who thought I would be interested. She was right, of course. This case was 2 American young men driving north through Alberta on their way to Alaska 10 years earlier, May of 1990. We were about 90 miles south of Jasper, close to the Saskatchewan River crossing. The creature was on the right-hand side of the road as we were heading north. My friend, Jason, and I were on our way to Alaska at the time, as from college. He to go home, I to go to work for the fisheries. As I said earlier, it was about 45 minutes before dusk. We had just come around a bend in the road when we happened to look to the side of the road and saw a creature. It looked as though it was standing still against a tree in order not to be seen, as it undoubtedly heard us approaching. It looked right at me as we passed it at about 45 to 50 miles an hour. In the approximately 4 to 5 seconds we saw it, I could make out the shape of its face and the color of its fur. Irish red setter. In about 3 strides it turned and was out of sight. I do remember the eyes were yellow, like those of my wife's cat. It did not look friendly, if that is the right word to describe its demeanor. It gave me a look like a wild dog might give you if you came upon feeding it. I know it's been 10 years since my sighting, but my recollection of it is fresh, as it is one of the most profound experiences of my life. The witness in the case did not want his name made public at the time of our talk, so I assumed the same was true for his friend who was actually driving the car at the time. The friend did not make out any reports for me or the BFRO. I was most struck by the hair color described. Irish setter red. I have heard of reddish color hair reported before, but this was the first and only time in my experience that I can recall Irish setter red as described. November 17th, 1995. This incident did not come to my attention until the year 2000. I was visiting the late John Green at his house in Harrison Hot Springs when he told me of this Alberta report he had received from the BFRO. John wanted me to follow up on it. The witness did talk with the BFRO researcher, Kevin Withers. There was contact information in the hands of John Green, and when I returned to Calgary, I contacted the witness in this case, a man named Mikavina, who now resided in the south of Calgary in the town of High River. I paid him a visit in August 2000 to interview him about what he saw on November 17th, 1995, while hunting off Route 532, not far from the town of Longview. What follows are part of that interview. I found Mr. Mikavina to be an honest man who was more curious about what he saw than I was. Tell me in your own words what happened. We were across the valley, my dad and I up on the other side, and there was a bunch of trees going up through the bottom and up the side of the other. And then there's a big open field on the other side. We were sitting there on the little knoll looking for animals. I had my binoculars and whatnot, and about a quarter mile away in the brush with my binoculars, I saw 2 mule deer females. I had my mule doe tags. It was the afternoon. It was after lunch, probably around 1 p.m. or so. And I spotted these 2 deer, and I said to my dad, "There's 2 deer." He says, "Where?" I had to explain to him where I saw them, and he finally saw them in the trees there. He said, "Where?" I had to explain to him where they were, and he finally saw them in the trees there. When they came out of the trees there, he said, "Oh yeah." Then I say, "I'm going." And he says, "You're not going to make it over there." I say, "Sure I am." But I went up, and it took about, probably 10 or 15 minutes to walk up there. There's an old logging trail that comes up the side of the hill to the top. I walked along up that road. I wanted to get up behind them, the deer, 130, 150 yards away from them. There was a lot of snow. The snow was about 1.5 feet deep, and I was trudging along. I got up there and I had a shot and I took one. Unfortunately, I missed for whatever reason. Probably hit a tree or something, because there were trees between us. So they went up and around. There's a gorge, and they went up there and around the gorge and where the open field was. So I thought, well, I will go off after them, figuring I would catch them somewhere in that field. I get there and I start looking around, went up along the edge of the brush and started to look across the field for these 2 deer. Of course, I couldn't see them at all. At the far end of the field, probably close to 400 yards away, I spotted these trees swaying back and forth. It was a very calm, still day, and these trees were swaying back and forth, and I thought, what in the world? I raised my rifle, figuring a bull elk or moose or something. I raised my rifle. I had a 10-power scope in my gun, 2.5 to 10. I'd turn it down to 2.5 because I was in the brush. I didn't turn it back up, so I was looking through the scope. All of a sudden, this creature comes out from the trees with its hands or arms straight up in the air, swaying them back and forth. I thought, here's some idiot out there dressed in black, waving his hands, scaring the animals away. He was far enough from me that he didn't concern me, so I put my gun down. Because as soon as I saw a human form, you put your gun down. You don't stand there with your loaded gun aiming at somebody. So I put my gun down and looked up and took maybe, 10 seconds, maybe at most, to run from where it came out of the trees, across the field and down into the bush again. A distance of about 100 to 150 yards, something around there. I was thinking at the time, it was some idiot, some environmentalist, out there chasing the animals away so we couldn't hunt. There had been reports that some of those people were doing that, so I turned around and started heading back through the bush. Going through the bush, I didn't see anything. It was real quiet. I went back to where my dad was. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I started heading back towards the truck. We were about a mile into the bush. I told him what I saw. We both figured it was some guy dressed up chasing animals around. The 2 men returned to the same area the following day, and both went to the treed area where the trees had been seen shaking. The trees seemed to be at least 7 inches thick and not at all that easy to shake. Mr. McAvina then went to check the line of tracks the figure had made as it walked away. It was deep snow, so nothing resembling the bottom of winter boots was seen. Also, it took him nearly 25 minutes to cover the same snow-covered gorge the subject seemed to cross in a few minutes. It was his father at this point who suggested Sasquatch. Mr. McAvina did say it was all black from head to foot, but he really could not tell if it was covered in hair or not. I had no reason to doubt that this man saw something or someone that day. September 2000. On January 21st, 2001, I was contacted by a young man who did not wish to be identified, so I will refer to him only by his first name, Seth. At the time, Seth lived with his parents in Grand Prairie, Alberta. He was 13 years old. His father encouraged him to report what he and a friend of 15 years saw while they were out on 2 ATVs on Seth's grandfather's land near Rycroft, Alberta, the previous September of 2000. The other witnesses goes by the name John. On the date in question, both boys were riding ATVs not too far from the grandfather's cabin. Both boys were armed. Seth carried a 12-gauge shotgun, while John carried a .22 caliber rifle. They stopped and were discussing where they should go and in what direction, when they were both startled by a strange high-pitched animal scream, which did not seem too far distant. They started up the ATVs and headed in the direction they thought the noise was coming from. After about 10 minutes, they came across what looked like footprints on the ground. The prints seemed to resemble barefoot human prints, but bigger, 15 inches. The boys did not try to photograph the prints at the time, as they had no camera, and the cell phones of that were the old flip type, which did not have a built-in camera. They followed the broken line of prints down to a creek where they both saw the subject walking along the opposite bank. Seth thought the subject had not seen them at first as it was walking, and then it would stop, walk a few more steps, and stop again. My thoughts are, it must have heard and seen the 2 ATVs. When it seemed to see them, it turned and dashed into the trees to disappear from view. John told me it wasn't moving at all, and it just stood there in one spot looking at us for a few moments, then turned slowly, walked into the trees. I have to say, a little different than dashing into the trees described by Seth. Both boys said that the subject was hairy. Both say that the hair color was brownish black. Both boys say that the subject stood and walked upright on two legs, and that at no time did they see it drop down on all fours. Seth claimed that the encounter lasted 1 or 2 minutes. John says 2 to 3 minutes. Both boys described the face as gorilla-like. Seth saying the skin color on the face was very dark. John saying the skin color was black. Neither boy smelled anything before, during, or after the subject was no longer in view. Now, Seth's father told me after I was finished talking to the boys that they had contacted me at his encouragement, as he felt neither boy was the type to make something up and stick to it. They were. It's just a weirdly written sentence, sorry. But he did mention that Seth's grandfather, who owns the cabin and surrounding land, does like to tell Sasquatch and other strange stories to entertain around the campfire at night. Also, John was reading my second book at the time they contacted me, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, The Continuing Mystery. I was inclined to believe that the boys had indeed encountered something or someone that day. September 2nd, 2010. The Crandall Campground incident of May 1988 remains, for me at least, one of the most interesting and convincing cases I have ever looked into. The original publication of this book in 1989 was delayed for a bit so parts of the witness's interview could be included. Not too far from Crandall's campground, another incident occurred long after I had left Alberta for the lower mainland of British Columbia. I remember thinking in those years of research in Alberta how unfortunate it was that myself and the late Professor Vladimir Markotic seemed to be the only people looking into reports on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. After Vladimir's death, I seemed to have the whole place to myself. And since the move to the west coast, a number of good researchers have taken up the cause. Sean Vialas is one of those good researchers who have continued to look into matters. He created the AlbertaSasquatch.com webpage, and he informed me he was investigating a roadside report inside Waterton Lakes National Park very close to the Crandall campground. Thomas. Here are the emails back and forth between myself and the witnesses. I briefly spoke with him on the telephone, and he seemed like a credible individual. The person that sent him my way I also consider credible. I have known her for a good part of my life. I met her when I was 7 years old. I am almost 33 years old now. I let him know I would be sending you the email regarding this sighting. I figured that you might be interested, as the Crandall sighting was one of the most important occurrences of your research career. Sean Viala. Sean did correspond with the main witnesses in this case after assuring him that he would not be identified. That assurance will continue now, as he will be referred to as MS here in this response to Sean's inquiry. Hello, my name is MS. Told me that you were interested in Sasquatch and gave me your email address. Here is my story. My girlfriend and I decided to go camping for the September long weekend. I searched the internet for the best place to go and decided on Waterton Lakes National Park, as neither of us had ever been there before. We would choose our exact place to set up camp when we had arrived there and looked around for a bit. We left on Thursday afternoon around 1 p.m. We did this so we could get there and get things set up before all the other long weekend campers began to roll into the area. We arrived in Waterton around 4 p.m. and began looking around the place for a nice spot. It happened as we were driving along Cameron Falls Drive, about 2 kilometers from Crandall Mountain Campground. As we came around a slight bend in the road, my girlfriend and I spotted what we thought was a person that was about to cross the road, so I slowed down just in case they tried to cross in front of me. As we got closer, I realized that it was not a person. My first thought was that it was a bear standing up on its hind legs. My girlfriend didn't know what it was either. Then it crossed the road in front of my car, and we knew that it was not a person. It took only 3 to 4 steps to get all the way across the road, and then it walked off into the trees on the other side. I wanted to stop in the next campground and have a look around, but my girlfriend would have none of it. She wanted to camp as far away from where we were as possible. She was really freaking out, so to calm her down, I just kept driving. We finally camped at a spot that was far away from any campground, and I had a good weekend. She was nervous all weekend, every noise she was jumping at. We didn't see anything else that weekend except for the deer and the small bear. If you have any questions, please ask. I will try as much as I can to help, but it was over and done with pretty fast. Yours truly, MS. After several more emails, Sean informed me both witnesses in this case did not wish to be involved in any further investigations. They also wished not to be named publicly. They did give Sean some reasons for this request, and I can't blame them. Last week of May, 2004. Just after hearing of the case you've just read, another roadside sighting report was forwarded to me, which had also occurred inside the boundaries of Waterton Lakes National Park, though it predated the previous incident by 6 years. It was the last week of May 2004 on the Acamino Parkway and Waterton Lakes National Park. Early in the morning, it was overcast, light drizzle. I was driving and remembering thinking to myself that there was a lot of snowshoe hares, rabbits, along the side of the road eating the fresh greens. I focused on one hare on the left side of the parkway, but my attention quickly focused on the right side of the road, and I saw a large black figure looking at the hare and then quickly looking at me. It was standing in the ditch with its left arm turned away, a branch. It was standing in the ditch with its left arm turned away, a branch as if to get a better look at me. Then quickly, as it happened, it ended. I kept driving past, wondering to myself what I'd just seen. I was in a daze of sorts, trying to comprehend what I had just saw. I did not stop and try and get a picture, nor did I stop to look for prints. I was just in a wild state of shock. That's all I can say. It's hard to describe my feelings. I have only told a handful of people. Most laugh. I still think of it today, playing the whole scene over in my head. When I returned home from my photography trip, I researched the internet and found there was a sighting at Waterton almost to the day in 2002. This report was given to me by another good Alberta researcher, a fellow named Rob McNeil. Rob told me he considered this witness as a reliable fellow, though he did not wish his name to be made public. No problem there. He is with the majority. The witness was of the opinion that the creature he saw was hunting the snowshoe hare, which seemed to be out in force along the road at this time of year. He saw it in a bush-covered ditch, from the chest up, black hair, solid black. He estimated that with the ditch being very deep that the creature was about 7 feet tall, though he stressed that this was speculation on his part. Was it a Sasquatch or some other animal he mistook for a Sasquatch? Rob McNeil is of the opinion that he was telling the truth. I would agree with him. May of 1992. I received a letter from a fellow whom asked that his identity remain confidential, so I'll refer to him here as Bob. He made contact with me during the month of December 2006. I later gave him a phone call, as he told me this was concerning something that he had encountered in Cypress Hills Provincial Park 24 years before in 1992. Well, my thoughts were in no hurry there. Not like there will be anything to follow up on, so I took my time over the next couple of days and prepared a file number for Bob's report, Steenburg file 50094. But as the details were reviewed, I had the overwhelming feeling that this story was familiar and that I had heard this before, so I started going back through my Alberta reports files, and sure enough, I came across Steenburg file number 50071, which contained a file report from 1992 that was sent to the late John Green just after the incident occurred, but the sender would not identify himself. John sent the information to me, hoping I could follow up on it. Needless to say, without any contact information, my research went nowhere, and I just ended up filing away what was in the written report. I did not mention to Bob that I had a copy of what he wrote to John Green 24 years before. Let's see if the story has altered at all over that time. Bob sent me a detailed written report. Hi there. My name is Bob, and I live in Medicine Hat, Alberta. My partner and I had a sighting of Sasquatch in 1992. The sighting happened in Cypress Hills at a lake known as Spruce Coulee. The month this occurred was in May, and I believe it was a Tuesday, and at the last day of the month. The reason I remembered the date was because myself and my partner both worked the previous 3 days, and it was a long weekend, and we both worked. We had planned a fishing trip to Reservoir Lake, which was also in the Cypress Hills. This fishing trip was planned on the Friday of the long weekend, and no one knew of our plans. We worked our long weekend shifts and could not wait to get out to Cypress Hill and fish. The long weekend was over and our day that we had planned had arrived. We packed a lunch, got our gear together, went and got gas, and were on our way. When we arrived at Reservoir Lake, it was around 10:30 a.m. We were shocked to see that the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, were on the boat launch watching a very large boat that was dragging the lake for two men in their early 20s that had fallen out of their boat and were presumed drowned. The families were also on the boat launch waiting for word on their loved ones. It was a very sad sight to see. We decided not to fish while the rescue operation was going on. We made a decision to go to Spruce Coulee to see if we could have some fun fishing there, as it was the same time full of stunted yellow perch. I did not think it was a very good idea to go to Spruce Coulee because of the large number of very small perch, but my partner came along to fish, and she wanted to fish at Spruce Coulee. We arrived there at around 11:40 a.m. When we got there, there's a flatbed work truck parked on the dam. There were 3 guys working on the bathroom, making a lot of pounding noises, tearing wood off the walls. Anyway, we were there for about 15 minutes when the workers stopped their work and threw their tool belts on the back of the truck and took off on his truck, of what I figured might be their lunchtime. As soon as the truck was out of sight, I happened to be looking at the path that runs the east of the lake. This was when our sighting occurred. I saw it first. My partner was a little ways from me to my right. She was fishing when this very large 2-legged animal appeared on the east path out of the woods. It was quite a distance when first seen by myself. I immediately froze, could not deal with what I was seeing, and all the hair was standing on my body. After I thawed out from fear, worst fear ever for me, I watched this animal as it's heading north towards me and my partner on the civilian trail, and it was moving very smooth for such a large animal and was covered a lot of ground with very large steps. When this animal started to get a little closer, that is when I noticed my partner, for her to come and see this unusual thing walking on 2 legs. Then she saw it. It was approximately 300 yards straight across from us. She guessed it had to be between 7 and 8 feet tall. This animal was alerted by our talking and had walked another 100 yards towards us. But all of a sudden, it went into a crouch and started pulling weeds and grass. This animal's hair color was a reddish black, not very dark. What ended our sighting was a very thick layer of fog had crept over the lake, and we lost sight of our animal, and then we hurried to our vehicle and got the heck out of the area. Bob. I never told Bob that I had a copy of that report that he had sent to the late John Green. I was impressed by how little had changed when I compared the two. He was still bothered by what he saw, but he did return to fish on occasion to Cypress Hills Park. He has never seen anything like it since. May 2011. I will conclude this Alberta update with the last case report I have looked into from the province. This incident occurred in a public campground which has had the history of sightings reported, a few of which I did investigate when I was there and am happy to find out incidents are still reported. The witness in this case also requested to remain anonymous, so I will refer to him as AV. I found out about this incident when the witness sent a report to the website of researcher Cliff Brackeman. Cliff, remembering my history of research in this area, forwarded a copy of the report to me. I did try to phone AV, but it was some time before he heard my message, as he and his family were on vacation in British Columbia for a while. He did contact me on the night of May 6, 2013, nearly 2 years after the incident. I made arrangements to interview him the next night over the phone. I will include the whole interview here to give the reader an example of how I conduct a witness interview, and also how the questions have both changed and stayed the same since this work was first published in 1989. Could you state your full name, please? AV. What is your present mailing address? Answer withheld. What is your phone number? Answer withheld. What is your occupation, AV? I work for an automotive company parts department. Company name withheld. You're former military, aren't you? Yes. What branch of the military? Army, 2nd Battalion, PPCLI. Do you wear corrective lenses? Occasionally, for reading. Were you wearing them at the time this happened? Yes. What was your age at the time this incident? I would have been 30. Please tell me what happened. Basically, what happened is we were camping. It was the first time we had gone camping that year. We had gone to the campground that Saturday morning. We spent the day there. We, did typical camping things. Walked the dog, had lunch. We had just finished up with our dinner when we decided to go for a walk down by the river. We were just kind of walking along the bank for a bit, not paying much attention to anything. The sun had just gone behind the mountains, which was why we had decided to start heading back, and I took the dog down to the edge of the river. And when she got down there, she just started staring across the river. I didn't think much of it at this point. Told her to get a drink, hurry up. She just kept staring across the river, and then all of a sudden the hair on her back started to bristle. I looked over and couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, and she's still staring intently across. So I kind of got on top of her and put my head on top of hers so I could see the kind of direction she was looking at. And then I saw this large mass across the river. It was 150, 130 yards away from us. I originally didn't know if it was a large bear or a rock because it wasn't moving. Then after about 30 seconds of looking at it, I bent down to the dog and told her, "Come on, let's go," and looked up again, and that's when I saw it stand up. When it stood up, it took a step to us. It took a step to its, it would have been its left, kind of pivoted, and took 3 more steps into the tree line. It was 3 distinct steps I saw. And when it went into the tree line, into the shadows, it just blended so well with the shadows of the trees, I didn't see it anymore. Where did this occur? Bow Valley Campground, which is Bow Valley Provincial Park, just east of Canmore, Alberta, just off the Trans-Canada Highway. It's right on the Bow River. Near the old cement plant on the river there, right? Yep, just down the river from that a little. Well, what was the date of this incident? We always go camping, I think it's the weekend before the May long weekend, Victoria Day in Canada. I think it would have been May 10th or 11th, the Saturday before the long weekend. That's the first weekend we go camping. Witness at this point starts going into details which I have not asked for yet. When I saw it first, I know what it wasn't, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't think much of it. My thought on the situation was it wasn't because there are none Sasquatch in Alberta. That's more BC, Washington, Oregon area, so I didn't make a report for it at the time. It was later on that year that I was actually reading through the paper and came across an article about Todd Standing and his accounts and everything, and looked at his research and whatnot, and he was not what I saw whatsoever. So I put the whole thing by the wayside for a bit. It was probably close to a year after I saw it when I started talking a little bit about it. I made one report to another group of research people, and we did an interview and went out to the location. He told me, BFRO researcher Gary Cronin, that there had been other activity in that area the same month reported by other people. What time of day or night did this occur? It was just after the sun went down, between 8 and 9 o'clock. The sun had just gone down behind the mountains, and that's why we were heading back. So there was still enough light that you could see, but there was no glow from the sun in the west direction. Describe the area in which this took place. It was off the Bow River, fairly large river. Was it on the south bank or the north bank? We would have been on the east bank, and it would have been on the west bank. Does not the river run west to east at that point? Yes, it runs west to east. So was the subject on the north or south bank? It would have been on, I'm trying to think here, it would have been on the north bank. I think AV was wrong here. The campground lies on the north bank of the Bow River, which is where he was camping. If the creature was on the opposite side of the river, it would have been on the south bank. Unless, of course, campsites now had been added to the south bank since I moved from the area in 2002. We continued. So you're saying it was on the north bank? Yeah, I think so. What distance would you estimate you were from the subject when you saw it? 115 to about 130 yards. What color was it? I really couldn't get a color, not a specific color. It was dark, but not black, possibly a heavy dark brown. When I thought it could be a grizzly, but it was darker than a grizzly. It wasn't a black bear, way too big for a black bear. With that greyhound, there's the color, which is called dun. I did not know that, which is gray with some brown mixed with it. It was similar to that. What was your first impression of it? I thought, because it was hunkered down, I first thought it was either a rock or a grizzly bear, but when it stood up, that's when I was 100% sure of what it was. I knew what it wasn't. I knew it wasn't a person, just from the size of it. I know it wasn't a bear, because a bear couldn't stand on 2 feet and pivot the way this did, and it walked as clearly with a stride. How did you react when you first saw it? Shock, more or less, just trying to process what that was. I just saw this and can't explain what it was that I saw. I felt no fear or excitement or anything like that. It was more military. You trying to evaluate your situation and surroundings. I just tried to figure out what I saw. I really can't explain it. What was it doing? It was bent down near the river. I don't know if it was digging at the river as soon as when I was looking at it there, but there was no movement from it whatsoever. Then, as I said, after about 30 seconds, I turned around and went to grab my dog and looked away from it. And when I looked back up, that's when it got up and moved. So I don't know if it noticed we were over there and was just staying still. When I broke looking at it, that's when it decided to get up and move. Was it hairy? I really couldn't tell if it was hairy. It was one solid color. At 115 or 130 yards, I really couldn't distinguish hair. It wasn't skin. It wasn't clothing. I can rule out what it wasn't, but I can't say with 100% certainty that it was hair. How far did you think you were from it? 115 to 130 yards. Did it stand and walk upright? Yes. Did you ever see it go down on all fours? No. How tall do you think it was? Based on the size and the distance, 7.5 feet? Yeah, I'd say 7.5 foot range. How much do you think it weighed? It would be 500 pounds. Easily. Shoulder width, being in the military, you see guys that distance walk with full rucksacks and kit gears with 130-pound kit gears on their back, and this thing was bigger than that. How long did you see it for? 30 seconds when it was standing. No. When it stood up, it took those 3 steps into the bush. It was 8 to 10 seconds. When it was down by the river, was it at the water's edge? Yes, right at the water's edge, yeah. How far from the water's edge did the tree line, or was the tree line? I didn't go over there. I estimate 10 yards. Did you see it? I think I did. What was its or did it see you? I think it did. What was its reaction? I think its reaction was to stay as still as possible, which it did until I broke eye contact with it. As soon as I did that, that's when I got up and it moved around into the bush. Could you see any facial features? No. Could you tell if it was male or female? No. Can you describe the arms? When it walked, it did have arm swing. You could see that. You could see the motion. Did it make any noise? No. No noise. Did you smell anything before or during or after? I didn't, but I honestly think my dog might have, which was why she started looking over there. What breed is your dog? She's a greyhound. How old? She would have been 3.5 when this happened. Did she bark or growl at the subject? Not at all, which is strange for her. Are there any other physical characteristics of the subject that stand out in your memory? Just the fact when it did get up, it made a step off to the left leg. It made a distinct pivot, 180 degrees back towards the tree line. Did you check for footprints later on? I did not. No, not knowing what it was. My daughter was there, but she did not see it. Was she at the riverbank with you and your dog? She was at the riverbank. She was throwing rocks in the river. You didn't draw her attention to it? Well, I didn't know what it was. How old was she at the time? She was 8. What do you think it was? Originally, I thought, looks like a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, but at the same time, I thought they don't live here. They're on the West Coast. I always thought that was the reported ranger habitat. After a while, after I processed everything, it came to me more than likely that's what it was. Have any of you or your family members ever had an incident like this before? No. Are you convinced you saw Sasquatch? Right now, the more I process this, yes. Have you ever made a report like this to anybody else? No. Do you wish to remain confidential? Yes, just because of my work. The reason I haven't mentioned it to a lot of people is because of my profession and my family. I would like to remain confidential. AV, it seems to me, did indeed encounter something strange at the Bow Valley campsite that May evening, something which he later tried to find out more about. Studying videos from researchers whom I personally have grave misgivings about, an individual who claims many encounters with Sasquatch, but I personally do not believe a word of. AV says that the creature he saw was nothing like the videos this man claims to have shot over the last 10 years or so. Probably a very good reason for that. Fortunately, he did end up talking to another researcher at BFRO member, Gary Cronin, who did go to the location with AV to do some on-site investigation. When I talked to Gary over the phone about this, he told me in his opinion AV was being honest and forthright. I'm a little surprised he did not mention sending in a report to researcher Cliff Brackeman of Finding Bigfoot fame, who informed me of this incident in the first place. But remembering back to my days in the area all through the 1980s and 1990s, there were several reports in and around the Bow Valley campgrounds, as well as just a little further down the highway in Banff National Park. Well, a lot has happened in the province of Alberta since I moved away in September of 2002. When I started researching, it was the late 1970s. I had the whole place to myself. Now, a good number of dedicated researchers have taken over trying to find an answer to the ongoing Sasquatch question on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. There was never a doubt in my mind, as I researched this wonderful wilderness, that if indeed the Sasquatch did exist and was more than a great piece of Western mythology and folklore, it does indeed dwell in Canada's Wild Rose province.